Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy. Very excited. Today, we're going to talk about an important topic with two really important women with wonderful, cool brains. So, welcome to the show, Kisa, Marx, and Emily Clark. Kisa, would you introduce yourself? And then Emily, you go ahead, and then we'll jump in.
Sure thing. Hey, Heather. Thanks for having me again. For those who don't know me, my name is Kisa Marks. I have a small nature and play focused nonprofit organization called the Play Lab. It is in Oak Park, Illinois. I'm an author, anti-racist curriculum developer, and staunch advocate for play and
Mhm.
all things liberation.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm Emily Clark. It's nice to have me,
Yeah.
have us all together.
Have us.
Yes, it is nice to have us all together.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Clearly my PhD work has fried my brain. I'm a PhD
Mhm.
student in early childhood education, and I run a research to practice initiative on Instagram called @EarlyEdM, where I help break down really what research means for our field so that we can all be doing better together.
hmm Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you're both here. Today we're talking about a white paper that you two wrote together for IPA-USA's 50th anniversary. So do just a little bit of background here. IPA-USA is the International Play Association, the United States branch of that organization. And for their 50th anniversary, they put together a collection of white papers on topics. The range is so broad. It's children in
Mhm.
play, it's elementary school, early childhood, it's college students, it's adults in general. It's really
Yeah.
an impressive collection. So we'll post the link to the digital version of it in the show notes. But you two wrote together a paper called Redefining Basic Needs, Eliminating Systemic Barriers to Ensure Every Child Can Thrive. So I'm going to read the first two paragraphs. Hold on, listeners, they're short paragraphs. Stay with me. To kind of set the tone. And then I just wanted to have you here so I could listen to you two talk about your ideas more. So I'll turn it over and we'll see where the conversation goes. But you start by saying, picture it, a learning environment filled with the hum of eager young minds, each overflowing with potential and curiosity. At the pulse of this vibrant space are educators dedicated to shaping the future generation. Their passion radiates through every lesson and interaction as they strive to ignite the flames of knowledge within each child. Yet, amidst this bustling scene of promise, a subplot unfolds, a narrative of struggle and resilience, often hidden in the shadows. Like a whisper in a crowded room, the system designed for belonging inadvertently fails to meet the diverse needs of every child, and for those unseen children, the effects reverberate like the roar of a lion in silence. What's that about? Explain yourselves. It's such a powerful opening. Where do you want to go next with that?
So I guess I'll just talk about the origin, how we
Mhm.
came to do this.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to write a contribute to the white paper, um, but I didn't. The way that I write is very kind of dreamlike and flowy, like artsy type.
Mhm.
And I knew that it needed more. Like, even though I possessed the knowledge, I wanted to back it up with here, these are the
Mhm.
receipts right here.
Mhm.
And so I knew and was obsessed with Emily Clark's page. And so I am not too good to not to slip into somebody's DMs. I contacted her and we just started talking back and forth
Yeah.
because I had been to her website. I saw that what she was doing, a lot of things on social media, unfortunately, are performative.
Mhm.
So I like properly vetted her. And then when I saw, oh, she's actually walking the talk, then we started to have a dialogue.
Uh-huh.
And once we did that, we realized that we were fighting the same battle. And I was like, okay, can we team up? And she
Yeah.
was like, hell yeah. And and
Yeah.
so it's just this kind of undercurrent of bias and just systemic racism that uh, undermines everything we do in the field of early education.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we give a voice to it and we paint an accurate picture of it, because you can say, oh, these things are blaring, but not really. It's very, very quiet how
Yeah.
it goes. And so that's how that beginning started to take
Yeah.
place. What do you
Yeah.
think, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that intro, and that intro is all Kisa. She brings like such life to her writing,
Yeah.
that really like puts your heart into it. And I think that our work together really, like we just love working together.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
We get this in this vibe, but I think we're both feeling like sometimes you feel like you're all alone in the advocacy work that you're doing.
Especially this type of work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Anti-racist work is
Hmm.
really, like you said, Kisa, it's really quiet.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you are working in early childhood, there's so many things to be thinking about. There's so much going on that needs done. And the vast majority of the educators are white.
Mhm.
And so, it's no surprise that in a system designed to support whiteness with white
Hmm.
teachers, who maybe haven't had a lot of opportunity to engage with anti-racist work, that we see these systems kind of just continuing. And where if you're
Yeah.
not looking um, for areas where systemic racism is really harming all of us, then you're not necessarily going to see it. And I think
Yeah.
once you see it, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's absolutely
So
everywhere.
so I want to
Yeah.
break in for a minute because, and I know this because this I used to be this person. I know there might be some people who are listening and heard anti-racist or heard whiteness and immediately thought, I can't listen to the rest of this. So I want to acknowledge that throughout your paper, you both acknowledge that the people working with young children are hardworking and they have good intentions, and we don't know what we don't know until someone comes
Yeah.
along and says, hey, here's another thing to think about. So I want to encourage people who might have been made uncomfortable by that to hang in, to to
Yeah.
to listen and to go and find the paper and read it. But I also want to ask you each, if you can, to talk a little bit about what you mean by systemic barriers or systemic racism and what you mean when you say it's designed to support whiteness. Because if I'm honest with you, that's a concept that's been new to me in this last year, this idea of the system being set up to support whiteness in early childhood.
Mm.
Um, so I want to start by kind of defining our terms, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's super helpful. And I just, one of the things that I think is really important is kind of what you just did, is this pause for white women.
Yeah,
You guys
yes,
talked about
yeah,
this before.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it's like it is this like hang in there.
Uh-huh.
Um, because if you're feeling uncomfortable, well, that's part of the process, right? That's
Right.
part of the growth. And it is going to feel a little uncomfortable if you are not open to seeing things in a different way.
Hmm.
And that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
lean into that sense of discomfort, because that's kind of the least we can do, right?
Hmm.
And
The
Yes.
bare minimum. Hmm.
Yes.
bare
Hmm.
Right. Just keep
minimum is
listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
being
Hmm.
authentic with ourselves and being like, I don't have all the answers. I don't know it all.
Yeah.
Let me sit back and listen to people who have done this work. And then Kisa, I'll knock it over to you for
Yeah.
about definitions of terms.
Yeah. So the other thing we need to do when we pause is understand that discomfort changes things.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And any type of metamorphosis is going to be painful. You're going to
Mhm.
be uncomfortable. It's going to sting. You're going to want to run away. But you have to go through it
Mhm.
in order to get to evolve and grow and develop into the person that you need to be. When we talk about different practices and different philosophies, we know we're going to be uncomfortable learning new things and unlearning new things. But somehow when it comes to anti-racism, and things like that, supremacist systems and things like that,
Mhm.
we just like, oh, no, I'm cutting it off. But we really need to lean into the discomfort, because once we crack that open, we see that this is something that plagues everyone.
Mhm.
Black people, Black educators can harm children through racist systems that have been designed.
Mhm.
Because Heather, you and I have talked about it before. Since the days of the Puritans, they came through
Yes.
and they created this way. And guess what?
Right.
We weren't there.
Uh-huh.
And so it was designed with a certain child, a certain family, a certain structure
Right.
in mind. And it didn't include a lot of people. And so, because education is one of the only systems that hasn't really evolved
Mhm.
since it began, we keep perpetuating those same systems.
Mhm.
And because we were Black people, Black children, Black educators, marginalized people, LGBTQ plus people were not included in that original curriculum, we're erased from it.
Mhm.
And so we have to point it out to see how we're being harmed. If you know that word, anti-racist, just means we're bringing in the people who are left out. It doesn't mean you bad white person. It
Right.
means that
Right.
whiteness as a construct has harmed everyone.
Mhm.
Not you, not your family, not the construct. The standards that were put in place did not include a lot of people. And so when I say anti-racist, I mean that we're going against those standards, that worldview, that lens that did not include a
Mhm.
bunch of people.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and we're all guided by the systems we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And as women, even just as women, period,
Yes.
some of
Mm-hmm.
those systems were not built for us. And then you definitely um uh all the marginalized communities you just mentioned, Kisa,
Mm-hmm.
also. So it's just important to understand, I think, the impact
Yeah.
and uh the reality that there's a system out
Mm-hmm.
there that's not working for everybody,
Yeah.
and then decide for ourselves, okay, well, am I a white woman who benefits from it, so I don't care? Or I'm afraid of it, or how dare you? Or
Yeah.
am I gonna say, oh wait, I want to include all children and families and colleagues. Like I want this system to work better for everybody. So what do I need to
Mm-hmm.
learn to
Yeah.
to do or
One
say?
of the things you just said, Heather, is you just said, there's a system that's not working for everybody, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's true, but there's also a system that's not working for anybody.
Anyone.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
All we
Yes,
have
yeah.
these,
Yeah.
really racist systems. And like that's I think a point where it's easy to check out is like, oh right, well, it's not working for Black children and families. That's a problem. We should do something about that. It's not working for anybody.
Yeah, that's important.
We're
Mm-hmm.
replicating these systems of power and domination
Uh-huh.
based on a variety of different factors, including anti-Blackness. And
Uh-huh.
so,
Mm-hmm.
like, we can't, we can't have a better world until we're all willing to sit in this and
Hmm.
really um, dismantle it. And
Right.
Yeah.
that's the only way. It's like talking about liberation. Like, we're not free until everybody is free.
Hmm.
That part.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's a really important, I think, distinction that's so easy to miss. That it's
Yeah.
it's just not working for anyone until it's
Yeah.
working
Mhm.
for everyone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So can we go back now? Thank you for going that way with me. And back to the paper where you're talking about this, these environments for children and the things that are happening there. You write that regardless of background or circumstances, every child yearns to be seen, heard, and valued, but that's not happening. Your assertion is that that's not happening in the kind of status quo, the way we do things with children.
Yeah.
Yes. So I want to give an example that points out what Emily was just saying. And this is any child.
Uh-huh.
Your child, the parent walks in at the end of the day and they give their kids a kiss and a cuddle and they ask, how was their day?
Hmm.
They don't want you to run a laundry list of all the transgressions that child has made. They don't even really want to know, did they sleep, what
Hmm.
they ate. What they want to know is, did you see them? Did you
Hmm.
hear them? Were they safe with you? Did you value their opinion? That's what they want to know.
Hmm.
And so if we don't do the bare minimum, we are erasing the existence of not just the Black child, which it matters, because disproportionately we are erased, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if you don't do it to any child, it harms all the children.
Hmm.
So it starts with our Black children because that's the most work we have to do. And it's kind of weird. Like my mom told me, if you learn to drive a big car, you can drive any car. And I feel like that's how this is. If you target the children that are most marginalized, most
Yes.
harmed, if we fix that, everything else fixes. It's a
Yeah.
domino effect.
It benefits everybody. And
Yeah.
that's true. Where does that come up for me? Hold on, I had a thought. It's gone. Okay, here it is. Children with, disabled children, right? We
Yes.
we talk about inclusion and adapting and accommodating or whatever, but that benefits all the children when we
It
adopt that
does.
mindset of what does this individual need,
Hmm.
or what am I not seeing? And I think this
Hmm.
is another example of how, just what you said, Kisa, when we're not doing special treatment for anyone, we're
Hmm.
looking at all children in a different way. It
Yeah.
starts with the ones who are the most erased, or
Yeah.
the most
Hmm.
invisible, but
Hmm.
everybody benefits from it. Every
Yeah.
child in that room, in that space, benefits from it.
Hmm.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I just want to, be clear that one of the things we do in the paper is bring a lot of evidence that
Hmm.
it's not just Keith and I saying this,
Yeah.
it's
Right. That's so important. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
really, anti-Black racism is really rampant in all of our school systems, and it starts in early childhood.
Hmm.
And we're looking at, the preschool to prison pipeline. We've been looking at for what, 20 years, more than
Hmm.
20 years, and it hasn't
Hmm.
changed.
Right.
Yeah.
We know that Black children are significantly more likely to be expelled from their preschools than white children. I was just reading a really interesting piece, and I wonder if I can find the name while we're talking later, but it was this woman who did a case study um, of a kindergarten, and it was a predominantly white kindergarten, and there were two 5-year-old children who had similar disruptive behaviors. One was
Hmm.
Black and one was white. And she followed them through the year and watched time and time and time again how the white child's behavior was excused,
Hmm.
was seen as something she needed support for, whereas the Black children's behavior, actually, I've got it. It was a predominantly Black school, and this was a
Mm.
little white girl in that school.
Mm. Hmm.
And the behavior of the Black children was so much more likely to be, categorized as disruptive,
Hmm.
as problematic, whereas the child was the problem, not the child
Right.
having a problem. That's what it is. It's Fridas. It's
Yeah.
called
Yeah.
problem children and children with problems. And I
Mm.
think that's
Mm.
a lot of what we're seeing in our implicit bias
Right.
in early childhood is the ways that some of that systemic racism shows up
Yeah.
really unbeknownst to us if we're
Hmm.
not noticing it.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think I think what I'm thinking of is a different study with similar findings. I think maybe it was the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, or
Different response.
maybe I can't remember. No, I think, but they were tracking the eye movements of teachers, like they had
Oh,
hooked them up,
yes.
and saw
Yes.
that the teachers' eyes, Black and white teachers, went to the
Hmm.
Black children more often, and
Hmm.
white children were doing the same, quote unquote misbehaviors,
Behaviors.
and either
Hmm.
being excused, or some sort of validation given,
Or
I
they
mean, or
couldn't even see them because
justification.
they were
Yeah, but
focused
they were
on.
looking, when they
Yeah.
followed their eyes, they were always
Hmm.
looking at the Black children. And I was looking, yeah, here you quote that National Prevention Science Coalition to Improve Lives has a statistic that while Black boys make up only 20% of preschool enrollment, they account for a staggering 50% of preschool expulsions. And
Yeah.
when we
I'm
add
proud of myself for that.
Latinx children
Well,
in there, it's even, true for them. But
I
um,
was gonna quote it, but I'm horrible at quoting,
that's
and I was
wild
thinking it
to
in my
me.
head.
Yeah.
So you saying it, I was like, yes, I got it. Okay.
Yeah, I've got it here, Kisa. I've got it all
Okay, thank you.
highlighted for you. Um, and I think we have to look at that hard data, right? It's really happening. It's not just someone saying, um, being dramatic
Mm-hmm.
or being woke or whatever
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
adjective you want to throw in there to
Mm-hmm.
dismiss people's concerns. This
Mm-hmm.
is a real thing that's happening to real children
Mm-hmm.
and none of
and
those
their
teachers are
families.
waking up every morning to say, I'm going
Yes,
to, expel a Black child
today is the day.
I've counted 4 Black
No
children, and
chocolate
then I
children
will
in
expel
here.
a white child. That's not what's happening. And
Right,
we
right.
know that, right? So it's not, we have to get away from not being able to have conversations
Yeah,
about racism because we think somebody's being mean.
right.
Niceness, I think we talked about this before, like niceness doesn't mean that we're not working within racist systems. You could be a really nice
Oh,
teacher
100%.
and you can
I
still.
A
think nice
100%.
supports racist
I
systems,
a
right? Yeah,
hundred percent believe
yeah,
that. Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's where I
Hmm.
find like the patriarchy and systemic racism just hit right on that nerve for
Hmm.
white women as we want to be
Hmm.
good, which for white women often means quiet.
Right.
Go
Hmm.
smooth things over for everybody, right? And so like talking about racism can really bring up a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah.
okay, but you
Yeah,
can't just stop there. Like you have to
right.
now deal with your stuff while you
Hmm.
keep doing this work because it's very real and it's impacting real children and real families
Yeah.
every single day.
Well, it's important. None of us want to admit that we have implicit bias, right? Because we have one kind of idea of being racist, and it's, you
Like
know,
cross burning,
cross burning
hood
and
wearing.
hoods and lynching and stuff like that. Well, I don't do any of that, so I
Right.
am not
Hmm.
racist. But
Hmm.
part of my ongoing journey is figuring that piece out, and that our brains are here to notice patterns and to categorize things, but sometimes those categories are like wrong and harmful.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
implicit bias. And what we do when people, when work like this comes out, or really everything you do, Kisa, is just making it explicit. So we're talking about
Hmm.
it and thinking about it, and then we become
Hmm.
aware when the pattern shows up. Like I remember years ago, I was working in a youth center, and it was elementary school, high school kids, but they were almost all of the kids that came were children of color.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember one time listening to some of the teenage boys talking about hearing car doors locking as they walked down the street to get to the
Yeah.
center from their house. Um, uh, and I was like, oh my God, I think that's me. Like I think I do that. So that's just
Yeah.
my example of something that was implicit
Oh,
becoming
yeah.
explicit because I listened to somebody else's perspective. And that really flipped a switch
Yeah.
for me. And I'm
And
not perfect, but I'm it's my goal is to always examine what's implicit and try and make it explicit because you can act on it once it's
those are the
explicit.
whispers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 Those are the whispers that I was thinking about. Growing up, those were conversations that I had amongst my peers and as an adult having with my husband and my family. When you're walking and you're minding your own business, in another lifetime, if I was out jogging or walking and nothing on, like I have on workout clothes, and someone would either move away or move their purse to the other side
Mhm.
of their body. They didn't, and they'll look at you and try to smile and say hello,
Mhm.
but you did that just
Mhm.
automatically. You didn't even
Mhm.
think like, oh, this person's coming, let me move. Not the
Yeah.
fact that one, I'm a woman, two, I'm in full workout gear,
Yeah.
minding my own business on a path.
Yeah. I was trying to think of in an early childhood setting like similar kinds of examples, and I think one thing I notice is that uh full names are used in a corrective tone more
Mm,
often, with
Mm.
Black children when I'm there, instead of
Mm.
just, like, how you scold with a full name.
Mhm.
I've been noticing that happens more often sometimes in places that I'm in. Um, uh, and also just like coded language, like, well, these are really urban kids, right? These
Yeah.
are these are really urban
Mhm.
kids and they have these different needs.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay, then why
Or
is your face doing that when
Neighborhood
you say it?
yeah. Yeah. And
at
you
risk.
see it a
At
lot through their
risk. Ugh.
parents. The
What,
way that their
Kisa?
parents are, you see it a
Oh,
lot through the way their parents are treated.
yeah.
Late
Hmm.
isn't seen the same way.
Hmm.
Um, your interactions. I had an interaction once where we had a family day and there was a young Black family, and one of the educators said, um, uh, oh, they're like, what is it called? They weren't approachable.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Classic.
what made you think that?
Yeah.
Right.
They
Yeah.
didn't do anything. Like, they were standing around, they were eating, they were with their child. Like, maybe was it their height, their
Mm,
skin color,
yeah.
the sound of their voice? Those, like, what's intimidating to you about this person in a body?
Hmm.
And that's the
Those are
thing I
things
think
we don't think
that's
about.
so key. Sorry, Kisa, is like implicit biases are unconscious, like they're
Yeah.
Mhm.
subconscious. You don't know that they're happening. Um,
Yeah.
and that's wild, first of all, to think about.
Hmm.
Mhm.
But like, so you genuinely, I'm sure that person was genuinely like, oh, real unapproachable. And without thinking through a lens of reflection on
Hmm.
ourselves, could have just walked away thinking, oh, that family wasn't very friendly,
Hmm.
Yeah. Mhm.
and without ever, it's not like you get a little ding when you do something that's an implicit bias.
Like, we need
Super
Mike
handy.
Huber's bell for
Yeah.
attunement.
Yeah.
That's bias.
That would come in so, so handy, but you don't know that it's happening until you do, anti-racist work on yourself and you
Hmm.
start looking for these areas. And, now I know some areas to be more aware of for myself. But that doesn't mean there's not a whole minefield of other blind spots I just haven't uncovered yet.
Hmm.
Oh,
Oh,
and
that's such a good word.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
Blind
such a good
spot.
word, blind
Yeah.
spots,
yeah.
because we all have them
Hmm.
in a lot of our our anti-blackness, anti-black practices are found in our blind spots. We're not
Hmm.
even aware.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So yeah, I love that word.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
just it's so important. That's why it's so important to be like doing this work. We like to talk about tick boxes, right? We get a checklist. If
Mhm.
we could just all have a checklist um, about what to do for racism, or it wouldn't work, right? If this
Yeah.
is like an ongoing process, just like any other checklist, it wouldn't work. You
Mhm.
have to be really, really committed. And I think one thing that holds us back is the idea of shame. As a white person, like I can feel quite ashamed of like, oh my God, I'm racist. Like
Uh-huh.
I did something that offended someone and I think offended is not the right word. I did something that caused harm
Right.
to
That's
someone.
the yeah.
That
Mhm.
caused the harm inside of them to resonate. And that's not what
Mhm.
I want to do. And I think when we feel shame, it's so easy to shut down. You're like, oh, I don't
Right.
want to feel that again, so I better
Mhm.
Absolutely.
not engage in this.
Mhm.
So I think part of effective anti-racist work, and I'm just making this up as I go along, but I think
Mhm.
part of it has to be around like it's it's just a part of being human,
Mhm.
making mistakes, learning about what our implicit biases are. That's just part of being human. It's not
Mhm.
shameful, as long as you're moving forward.
Right.
Yeah. And you would do that in any other reflective practice. If
Yeah,
you lose your shit and raise your voice at your kids and you're reflective, grown up, you
Hmm.
want to repair it.
yeah,
If you find out you did harm, it doesn't matter what your intent was. It matters what the impact is. And
Hmm.
so you want to repair it.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You don't
Yeah.
have to make this like 2, 3, 500 year issue with a personal issue. Fix it now. Fix
Mhm.
what you're doing now and fix what you're doing moving forward.
Mhm.
And stop thinking of it as I'm a racist and start thinking about oppressive systems.
Oh, that's
If you
good.
think about oppressive systems, maybe we can start to change things.
Mhm.
That's everywhere we go. We can look at a
Right.
million things, just like you just said, the first and last name. I never even thought about that. But that can be, if you say it in a way to scold,
Yeah.
that can be a way of putting a person in bondage. Now your name is weaponized. When
Yes.
I say your name, you're in trouble,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. So just on that, my students, when I teach my curriculum class, they have to do an observation about relationships and tone and interactions in a classroom. And one of the things they look for is every child's name safe in the adult's mouth? And there's always big conversation about that. But that's what it is. Some names
Yeah.
just become weaponized like that. So
Mhm.
there's a couple other things I want to make sure that I give you guys a chance to talk more about. You also include discussion of poverty in this article. Poverty is a multifaceted concept that has negative implications for young children. You talk about some research that talks about practitioners might be poverty blind in the same way that white educators often label themselves colorblind, and that
Mhm.
negates the lived experience of the children. So I
Yes.
wanted to just ask you to talk more about that.
Yeah,
You
well,
you
we
want to do
know intersectionality is huge, right? And we are
it?
all
Mhm.
made up of so many different identities. And we know the way that people of color in the United States have fewer economic opportunities and have a long history of being denied economic opportunities that have compounded over time for the people who have had access to them.
Right.
So we know there's a connection there. But we also know that like this idea of how we code language applies to poverty as well. We're more comfortable talking about poor children than we
Mhm.
are talking about Black children. But what I find really interesting is, we're always okay as a society with supporting children who's who struggle, who don't have enough to eat. But we're really uncomfortable supporting adults who don't have enough to eat. Even if those adults
Mhm.
are the one who are responsible for feeding.
Right.
For the children.
Right. The Puritans
Yes.
did that too.
They did. Damn those
I
Puritans.
know, they really messed it up.
You're gonna have to put an explicit one on this.
They always have.
Okay.
Every episode just automatically always has
Yes.
an explicit rating.
Yeah, I think, and so I think we get ourselves into this place where again we don't know what to say, so we would rather say anything, not say
Right.
nothing. And that I think is what this the quote that you referenced is talking about in regards to poverty is that sometimes we can say, oh, it doesn't matter. In my classroom, I treat everyone equally. And that
Mhm.
seems on the surface like a great thing to say,
Right.
but actually, everyone comes into a space, a community with their own lived experiences. And so if you're saying that, your lived experiences don't matter, I'm going to treat
Yeah.
you all the same, then we get ourselves into these places where we're not supporting anyone.
Yeah. And when we're blind to it and we say, I treat everyone equally, then you're erasing people right there. Because
Yeah.
just because you're giving them access doesn't mean that they belong there, right?
Mhm.
And so if I give all the kids the same thing, but Jameson over there needs something more,
Mhm.
he has what everybody else has, but he's still at a deficit because he doesn't have the things that he needs,
Right.
right? So we're not looking to give everyone some uniform material thing or uniform educational experience. We have to give everyone what they need.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
means that maybe Mary gets a little less because she has stuff
Right.
spilling over, right?
Yeah.
But Jameson needs a whole lot. So we
Yeah.
have to meet him where he is.
Mhm.
And you can't see that if you're blind to it and just like, well,
Right.
everybody is taken care of in my classroom.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
talked about that, I think, before with the no such thing as bad weather, only
Yeah,
bad
probably.
clothing. Yeah. And that when you say there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, you're leaving
Which I
out,
have said, yeah.
which I
But yeah,
said.
yeah,
I've said it before
yeah,
until I started to think about it. Like, really, that's super untrue.
yeah.
Like, we were stuck in a hurricane. Bad
Yes,
weather was bad.
yes. Yeah. And
There is a such thing as bad
I've said
weather.
that I was a child going to school with bread bags on my feet and socks on my hands because I didn't have
Same,
access to those kinds of
same.
good clothing, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's just really silly of me then as a grown up to be like, oh yeah, there's when it was my own lived experience, you know, so
yeah, yeah.
I have to notice the children's lived experiences.
And even if you supply those clothes for everyone in your class, once they leave the class and they hang their stuff up and they're outside with their
Hmm.
bread bags to insulate their
Hmm.
feet and their socks on their hands to keep
Hmm.
their hands warm, on their too thin jacket,
Hmm.
there is and they're on the bus stop,
Hmm.
there is a certain thing is bad weather.
Right, right.
And so we need to just use our words. I think in education, period, especially early education, we euphemize
Oh yes, we do.
everything.
Yes.
And poor really means black, and good really means
Yeah.
leave me alone. And you know,
Yeah,
and
we are very,
so
it is one of our skill sets in this
yeah.
field of work. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
Um,
have to be explicit. We have to be
yeah.
explicit and say, I supply these items. But there's still such thing as bad weather. We have to
Hmm.
ensure that the children are safe when they're outside.
Hmm.
And we supply these clothes, period.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're giving this underlying, very quiet message that what you have, you're not, you're substandard, right?
Yeah.
And yes, their clothes might not be safer, but they're not substandard humans, and their
Right.
experience is not substandard. That's what they have.
Hmm. And their families are not substantial. You know, we can't just
Yes.
we also tend to think they stop existing and they aren't
Once they
affected
walk out.
by anything that happens
Mm-hmm.
outside of our program.
Yeah.
When the United States does this thing where we're so hyper obsessed with school readiness and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
pack in all these academics when we know that a key to school readiness or school success is um, families who aren't living in toxic stress because they can't keep their lights on and they don't know where the
Yeah.
food's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But let's keep packing academics in for 2-year-olds and call that our attempt to make sure children are successful when they get to school. But
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
we
That ain't
One
can't.
of
it.
the
It's not, no.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
Emily's turn.
Wait.
Well, you can't do that. And one of the things that we looked at in this paper really specifically was this idea of toxic stress and was like
Mhm.
neuroscience and brain development and how all of these inequities impact the ways that children's brains are being built and how when families are struggling, that children are struggling.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
why is the obvious answer not support the families? Like the obvious answer here is not give 2-year-olds worksheets. The obvious answer is support their families so that their families can have literal brain space
Right.
to engage with their children, which is what all parents want.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All parents want what's best for their children. And I don't think you should be in this field if you can't wholeheartedly believe that.
Right.
Um, and how are we putting families at such a disadvantage in this country when we're not willing to support them with basic needs?
Mhm.
And instead, we try and look at the child all on their own when we know
Yeah.
that's not how things work. It's like we've talked about before, like removing the head from the child and just
Hmm.
focusing on the head. Well, it's like we want to remove the child from their family and then think we can fix everything.
Right. Right.
Um,
Or that we need to save them. It's
yeah.
not just removal, it's saving
Right.
sometimes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And there's this tricky spot we find ourselves in, like, oh, we can save you, we can do this. But it's like, I want to value you for exactly who you are, and I want to recognize
Mhm.
that you are having a really hard time,
Yeah.
and that it can be both. We can support people in ways that are really authentic and meaningful, but we can't use the fact that we you know, aren't sure what we're doing to just not help anyone.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Or that
And
we are in any position to decide who deserves the help and who's earned it and who hasn't.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between support and savior. Like, we
Mm.
don't need saviors. Children
Yeah.
don't need saviors. They might be in intact, whole, happy families that don't have opportunities, lack resources, are in whatever apartheid that might be, like environmental, it might be food, it might be whatever. But that doesn't mean they need your saving. They need support, resources, and opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
um,
You convinced
done
me.
it. We solved all the problems. We'll call it a day. I think that's exactly where it comes back to one of these places where, you asked at the beginning, Heather, like, what do you mean systems of white supremacy? Like, what does that look like? It comes back to this very white middle class centric belief that like your take home pay is what gives you value.
Yeah.
That the house you live in, the size of, your square footage is what gives you value. And, white supremacist culture is really, really tied to these economic goalposts. And that's very purposeful because that works people out. And as we get more as more people have access to more resources, then the goalposts get higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things where you're like, oh, maybe it is connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
It's all
Yeah.
connected. Yeah. Okay. So any last things you wanted to be able to talk about from the paper or your process that we haven't hit yet before we wrap up here in a few minutes?
I mean, I'm not sure we talked very much about the paper, but we did. We talked about
That's kind of how it goes. Welcome to the
Yeah.
show.
We talked about how we came about, like the process, what we were thinking about, not the paper exactly. So
Well, they can find the paper. They can
find the
read it, but now they
Yeah.
have all this rich perspective. They have a different shelf in their brain to put the paper on as they're reading it now.
Yes.
So the only thing I'll add, and the only reason I'm wrapping it up, folks, is because my kid's coming home for Christmas in a few minutes. I'm gonna go in. But you do dedicate some time that I want to acknowledge in the paper, talking about the importance of the well-being of the educators too. Like we have to take care of the people that we expect to do all this work.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to add anything to that or expand on that a little bit, or just let them go find what you said in the paper.
So
Yeah.
because this, were you going to say something?
No, go for it.
Be, just like children in any other marginalized group, we erase the experiences of the educators a lot, right? And like we fail to believe to acknowledge the fact that your teacher that is of the global majority may be experiencing these same things. Your teacher of the global majority or any other marginalized sector may have plastic under her shoes. She might be in a too-thin coat. She might be facing financial hardships, her trying to support her family, because we know what childcare providers get paid. And so they might have these same things, and they might not feel a sense of belonging in the space they're in. If they, I've been on that side where you're in a high quality childcare space and all you're thinking about is what you can't provide that's in this space for your own children.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so I'm keenly aware of how we can feel othered. We don't get the belonging that we're giving to the other children. So it's very important that when we're talking about basic needs, and basic needs including human warmth and emotional security, that the educator is included in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, when the educator cannot provide those things for others if they're not being given them themselves.
Right.
you know, we all have to, and that's where again it comes back to the system, right? Like
Right.
the
Yes.
Mhm.
not working.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just it's really, yeah, I think all of this work is, you know, from Kisa and I is really about saying like you're not in this alone. I know sometimes it feels that way, and
Mhm.
please come and find your communities of care. Please,
Mhm.
you know, amplify those voices of others who are doing this work because it's so important. And I think we don't want people to feel siloed. We don't want people to feel like, oh, I didn't know that, so now I can never start something new. No, like please
No.
start something new.
Mhm.
We're all starting something new every day,
Right.
Mhm.
and really prioritizing early childhood educators is a huge area where we need to be focusing our attention.
Mhm.
We need our
Mhm.
society to really be shifting in
Right.
what counts as important work.
Yeah.
And we have to band together. That doesn't mean you won't be challenged.
Right.
If I don't give a shit about you, I'm not saying anything. If I love you, I'm going to challenge you. And I expect for you to challenge me,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So don't think, oh, I feel bad. Like she's pushing these things in my face or they're pushing these things in my face. No, I'm challenging you because I love early childhood education. And because I love it, I want it to be better. And I know we
Mhm.
can do better.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end because we do get in circles of this narrative that we can't be critical of teachers because their work is so hard, or
Hmm.
and that both things can be true, right?
Yeah.
The work is very hard. There's a lot of hardship that the adults are working through to be able to provide the things we want to provide for the children.
Hmm.
But also we accepted the job, right? Like
Yeah.
we said we wanted to do the work. So
Hmm.
let's figure out how
Let's
we
do
Do
can
the
it
work.
then.
let's
Yes.
do the
Yeah. Let's
work.
do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, this was great. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed listening to you both talk, and I enjoyed
Yeah.
the paper. So like I said in the show notes, if you're listening, you can find the link to the paper and information about how to get more Emily or more Kisa in your
Yeah.
life. But for now, thank you both for this conversation on behalf of everyone who was listening.
Thanks,
Um,
Heather.
and
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.
Ta-ta.
Bye.